And it was the tension of knowing that God had something for me, but I couldn't see it. And so I took my car and drove it towards the pole to end my life, because I thought that death would be a relief compared to the hell that I was going through. And it was in that moment, dang it, dude, I wasn't trying to go.
Hey, it's how you know it's real.
Come
on, bro, give it to us.
It was in that moment where God was like, yo, hold on.
Yeah.
Like, I got something for you.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's hard, but I got something for you.
Oh, you, bro. That means I love you, bro. That means I'll go to war with you.
Fire, baby.
The reason why you need to know your identity is because when you know who you are, people don't get to define it for you. When I tell you guys who you have in your circle is important.
You're listening to the Bros to Men podcast with Cameron Persad, Jeff T. Osborne, and Roy Rand.
Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to the Bros to Men.
What's going
show,
on,
where
sir?
we create content that inspires action.
Straight up, sir. Yes, sir.
Today, I'm super excited. We're going to go deep into my brother. You know, you guys see all the highlights. You see the success. But we're going to go into the journey, into the struggle, so you can see exactly how we got to where we are today. So I'm going to throw it to Cam.
Yes, sir. I was so well said, Dips. Essentially, we just want to create a behind the scenes look, if you will, right? Yeah. You guys see the gyms, you hear the gyms. We're constantly encouraging you to apply the gyms, but a lot of times you don't really get a clear picture of how are you forced to learn those gyms, right? Where do they come from? So I think it's so important to kind of dive into that a little bit. And ultimately, I think our goal is that we want our listeners to literally feel like they grew up with us.
Right.
Right? When you guys tell others about Bros to Men, we want you guys to feel so confident about our stories and where they come from that you're confident in sharing that story with other people. So ultimately, let's do it. I want to dive into my boy Jeff's story. He's got a heck of a story. We're gonna get into it. Hey, there might be some tears shed today. We're gonna see.
Y'all already know, dog. I cry over Kleenex commercials, so I cry over everything. My kids watch Disney movies,
and I'm excited about this because we all grew up together, right? We're talking friendship 20 plus years, but there's always those parts in our own lives that we don't even share with the bros. And it's like, dang it, dog, I didn't even know you went through that. Or when did that happen? Where was I at when you did that? So I'm excited because I have this feeling where we're kind of revisiting each other's stories. And we're going to turn this into a series, right? So all three of us going to tell our stories. We're going to get that inside look to give you guys a really clear picture on where Bros and Men came from. You see the side of the men. You can see a little bit of the bro side now, right? What happened prior to becoming men. So with that being said, Jeff, let's get into it, bro. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the childhood. We'll get into the challenges and obstacles later in life, but tell the folks a little bit about just your upbringing, maybe originally where you came from, some of those first early obstacles. Man, let's get into it. I'm excited. Let's do this.
Man, I love it, dude. It's crazy because when you look at my story and you look at how everything just kind of transpired, my childhood was so crazy for me. Yeah. And the reason being is because my dad is from Virginia originally, right, and my mom is from Boston. So all of our family, majority of them are all of them are East Coast. Right. Yeah. So Pops was in the Marines, and so we ended up in Orange County. And so when we ended up in Orange County at the Tustin Air Base where we were living at, and when we were younger, it was crazy because I grew up in Orange County. Right. Yeah, so I was born in Orange, but then it didn't stop there. Like, I was raised the first half of my life in Huntington Beach. Yeah. So, when you're in Huntington Beach, we were the only black family in the neighborhood, number one, right? And I wasn't too aware of color. I wasn't too aware of what was going on. My dad did a really good job. He grew up in segregation. My dad grew up in Virginia, so he understood that. But my dad was also very eclectic in how, he loved certain type of music, like Hall & Oates and all that crazy, music. Right. And so he clung and hung out with kids that weren't black, the white kids on the other side of the track, literally on the other side of the track. So he got a lot of slack from even his own community, the black community, because he was into jazz and into all these different things. He loved playing tennis, but he was a big dude. And so when we grew up, it wasn't so much just know that you're black. Just know that my dad really instilled in us you're not the pigment of your skin. You're the color of your character, who you are.
That's a bar.
Yeah, man. So I grew up with that, but it didn't occur to me that all my friends around me were skateboarding, they were surfing. So naturally, I pick up skateboarding.
Oh yeah, I remember.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I pick up surfing, and yes, I can swim. So everybody watching this right now, your boy can swim, right? So, but it was nothing to me. But then I started recognizing as I started skateboarding, getting in these pockets, I started getting chased out of skate parks by these skinheads, and then they'd be yelling to me like, "Go back to Riverside County," and I was like, "Wait, what's Riverside County?" Like, I know Huntington Beach. When I would tell people where I lived, and so I started balling and playing football. So then I started creating a name for myself, and in the midst of all of these different things, I didn't know growing up in that world, being a black man in a white, predominantly white area, I wasn't aware of my color. I wasn't aware of that as a kid until, we were around 6th grade, and we get a knock on the door. And when we get a knock on the door, it's the sheriffs, and the sheriffs are telling us, you guys got 2 hours to evacuate your house. So I'm in the 6th grade. And I don't know why this officer, and my dad's like, yo, just pack everything we can. So I'm trying to figure out in the 6th grade why we got all of our plastic bags on the driveway. And then then this lady pulls up to take our dog, and who's a Doberman. And I was like, where's she going? Why are they taking them? And my dad didn't explain it to us. I couldn't understand why our home was gone. My dad worked hard at Northrop to get us this house. And then all of a sudden, all of our stuff's are in plastic bags, and we have to stay with our auntie across the street. It was like a family auntie across the street. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't go back into my home. And unfortunately, some people, my dad and my mom, were excited to buy a house. They didn't really know too much about business. And so these people end up like duping us out of our home. So they were like, okay, if you sign the house back over to us, then we'll get you a lower rate. And so they end up taking the house from us. And so my parents, being younger, didn't really know that. We lost everything, and that started the journey of us being homeless. And so I'm in the 6th grade wondering, who am I? 6th grade's your identity, right? So I'm wondering why these kids' parents
figure it out.
Right. Like, why do these kids get to, show up in these cars? And here I am taking a bus with Jessica, my little sister, bus 29, and we're sleeping when we can afford it. We're either in a car or we're sleeping in a motel in Buena Park. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my life. And it was in that moment that I started developing this identity complex where I created myself to be one thing just to escape the pain from where I was at.
So I'm assuming during this time is probably what led to the relocation of where we met.
Yeah, bro. So we sleep at there's 4 of us, and we're in the 1990. There's 6 of us: my mom, my dad, my 2 older brothers who were twins, and my younger sister. And so we're in the back of this 1992 Lexus. And then when we could afford it, we would sleep in a motel. And so Pops, he would come in this one bedroom. We'd all be on the floor, and they would pretend like they weren't hungry at times so that we could eat. And so unfortunately, dude, right before that happened, my dad started an automotive detailing company. So with the racism that was happening in Huntington Beach at the time, me and my brothers in the car, cops pulled my dad over because it's a white work truck, and so they giving him a hard time. Me and my brothers are out there like, yo, do you have any weapons in the car? My dad was like, oh, I just got this little stick, but I use it because when I detail, sometimes dogs come out, so I need to protect myself. The 2 officers who decided to press my dad, they were like, oh, well, he's got a concealed weapon. So they arrest my dad. I'm 10. My brother's 11. We're in Huntington Beach. These 2 officers who are white just took my dad and left us on the side of the road. Impounded the car. Gave him a little record. My dad had to do 3 weeks of jail time in Orange County for this bogus charge while he's fighting his case. So during that time, all of these things are happening. My dad can't get hired anymore because of what they did at regular places. So he has to ride his bike from Buena Park to Brea on a bike because 24-Hour Fitness actually hired him because he was in the fitness to do sales. And that was the only job. So he would ride his bike there, and I would hear him come home and cry to see us, or home, I say home, but in the motel to see all of his kids. But my dad was smart. He was an entrepreneur. He taught us entrepreneurship. He taught us, the love of God and his word. And so in that moment, I'm troubled. Because I'm like, yo, if this is God that you serve, and we in church, they tithe, and I'm like, oh, if this is the God that you serving and we homeless like this, I'm not dumb. I know you guys are pretending that you're not hungry, but you starving, but we can't afford to eat. Like, why would I follow this God? And so in that moment, then we end up moving with my grandma into Long Beach. So now we're in Long Beach, and there's 5 of us in a 1-bedroom studio my Grammy kind of helping us out. My little cousin's there. And so during that process, I started skateboarding to escape that. But that's when this reality of where I was at was there. And then finally we get the call, yo, we got our spot in Diamond Bar. Yeah. And then that's when we moved to the IE.
Right. So I remember, that's when we met.
Yeah.
And I remember, Pomona School District, new kid on campus. And bro, he had like these, I think he had like some skater shoes on. He had like some DCs or something. We're like, who is this, right? Yeah. So I think that's kind of connected to us right off the bat, because I was new. I was making this transition from like private school, and my mom was like, all right, we're going to try this public school out. When you mess up one time, you getting ganked. Yeah. Right. So like first day of school, and the kids who come from that area all have a very similar look. Yeah. I looked very different coming from private school. Yeah. And bro looked very different coming from Orange County. So we kind of connected right off the bat. Yeah. But talk about that a little bit, bro, because obviously it's Pomona School District is a lot different than Orange County School District, 100%. Right? So I'm assuming Orange County is probably predominantly something other than black.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can Pomona School District, it's not predominantly black, but I'm sure there's a lot more black kids than you saw in Orange County. So you talk about this identity crisis. You talk about trying to figure out who you are. You know how it is when you grow up in public school, specifically in the inner city. It's like you either fit into a group real quick or you stand out and you get targeted.
Right.
Especially when you're the new kid.
Right.
You don't have no friends.
Right.
You don't have no backup.
Right.
That's what kind of leads kids to going down the wrong path and start associating with certain specific groups, right? Mm-hmm. So give us that picture, right? So you come from being homeless. Yeah. You're moving around. Yeah. You land up on a school district.
So we come, I don't know if you remember, man. So there was uniforms there.
Yeah.
And so for the last 3 years, we didn't go back to school shopping. We had to go to Savers, which was a thrift store. And we had like $20. Mm-hmm. So whatever you could muster up in $20, if you could get a pair of shoes, then dope. Right. If you had, so that was kind of. So I remember I came with some faded like Dickies that I had because you had to wear blue with some dingy polo that, you know what I'm saying, that was I got from Savers. So I pull up and I see Cam and I'm like, who is this last of the Mohicans? Like, dude walking with the ponytail on. Yeah. Dude had the red Buffalinos on. Like, he was looking clean. And so and so I didn't, it was culture shock. And the reason why it was culture shock because other than when we would go get our haircuts in LA, because you definitely ain't getting no Supercuts haircut in Huntington Beach, right? Yeah. Had your hairline pushed all the way back, like, right. And so, so I had culture shock because I hadn't been around that many black people other than when I was playing junior All-American football. We would play Compton Oilers, we play Inglewood Comanche, we play South Bay Packers. So I go over there and I'd be all enamored, like, dang, look at them, they spatted. And so I was enamored by the culture, but I never felt like I was accepted into it because I didn't know it. Yeah. So when I come, I'm surrounded all these black people around me, and so I'm trying to find out who do I fit into. And it was crazy because when I tried to go fit in with the skaters, they were looking at me like, "Dude, you black? Like, what are you doing over here?" Right. And I'm like, "Yo, what's up, bro?" Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm talking like, right. And so they looking at me, and so then the blacks, I couldn't understand the language. Like I was looking at hieroglyph, like listening to like, and so they started talking music. So I grew up listening to K-Rock 106.7. So I'm like Red Hot Chili Peppers, 9 Inch Nails, Smashing Pumpkins, and they talking about Trey D, Goldie Loke, like, and so they were like, "Yo, which one do you like, Trey D or Goldie Loke?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Goldilocks is tight." Like, they was like, "Negro, what? Like, who are you?" Right. And so they were looking at me kind of crazy, and I was trying to fit in. And finally, you approached me like, "Yo, bro, what's up?" My name's Cam. And so when I was there, it was such a different world to me because it was like I had to relearn. I knew they looked like me, but they didn't sound like me. Yep. They didn't act like me. So I'd never been in another place. So I was surrounded by so many people who were similar, and yet I felt so left out. And so it wasn't until and that created this complex where I became this crazy liar because I didn't want to tell people that we didn't have a lot of money. I didn't want to act like I didn't know who I was or where I was at. So every morning I had my Walkman on and I'm listening to Big Boy in the Neighborhood. Hopefully I can pick up some black colloquialisms, right? So I can be on this music and all this stuff. But I think that was a moment in my life where the defining moment was I was a baller. So when it came to football, the only thing that really connected me to our culture was that I was a hooper and I could play football. And so that first year of Lord Beer was kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Our middle school was kind of like, shout out to Lord Beer though. Yeah, it was it was that merging. And I felt like it was kind of like the before I got to Diamond Ranch because it was like I got thrown in the gladiator school. But this whole time, man, it was me finding out who am I? I think we all deal with three different things. Like, there's three different questions that we always ask ourselves. Like, who do I think I am?
Yeah.
Who does God say I am? And then who do my other peers say I am? Ooh. It's who I think I am, because it's your thoughts, right? Your thoughts are like, how do I see myself? How does God see me? And how does everybody else see me? And so I saw myself as an outcast. I saw myself as somebody who didn't have money and didn't have the fresh J's. I never had a pair of Jordans in my life. I was rocking the Payless Pro Wings. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I was trying
making them look clean.
Bro, it was clean. I was making them look fresh. Like, yo. And so I couldn't, when Cam had Buffalinos, I couldn't afford them, but I saw Payless had a pair that looked like Buffalinos, so if I had the pants further enough, they just see that toe. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But I think all in all, man, that kind of created that, and that's when we ended up going into Diamond Ranch, and I was thrown into, at that time, then my brothers kind of got a whiff of the streets, and then that's when they ran away from home at a young age, and then I ended up in Diamond Ranch, and then from that moment on, it was kind of like my life took another twist.
It's a couple things I wanted to ask. Is one, you didn't have all the money and all the stuff and all the clothes. But I remember, like, when the Starberries came out. Everybody was like, yo, ain't nobody getting those Starberries. Right. And then you got them and made them look fresh. You knew how to put things together. You got people out here acting like they know fashion. You used to literally hit the thrifty store, hit Walmart, hit whatever, and then make it look clean. So one, touch on, where did you get your creativity just in general, and becoming, because it's not about your resources, it's about your resourcefulness, and you've always been resourceful. And then touch on the athletic career, because a lot of people don't know you lost your Scully to play receiver, and you were a hell of an athlete in basketball. I used to bust you up, but you are always a formidable opponent. So kind of touch on your creativity side and then your athletic side and how that kind of pushed you through the tough times.
High school was the craziest part for me, because high school is where you start forming identity, right? Right around your 6th grade, you start forming an identity. It starts going over. So when I went into high school, I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be accepted so bad that I was in this middle ground, this conundrum where I was too white to be black, and I was too black to be white. Right. And so I was in this middle, like, who's going to accept me? Where am I going to go? How am I going to fit in? And so I just really dove into sports at that time, because no matter how much you would dog me because of how I spoke or how proper I spoke, or me listening to Frank Sinatra or Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, all of the stuff that I loved, it was like, yo, he can ball though. So that kind of like brought me in, but I still felt like I wasn't in, because I didn't know all of these things of where they were at. And so in that moment, I started balling. Was great. It was awesome. But then it drove me to a place where I wanted to fit in so much that I was trying to mimic everybody else around me. I was trying to mimic what everybody else was doing. And so I didn't have the money for fashion, but I realized early on that fashion is what you make it. And if you wear something confidently, cats they can try to knock you, but then it became, man, only you, Jeff, can pull that off. Only you could do that, because that's confidence, right? So I started building that confidence in myself. And right around that time is when my life kind of started taking two twists. On one end, I'm in Spanish class, and Miss Ramirez with Hop, and I'm in there with Hop, and yeah, man, that's my bro. And so he over there making fun of me. That's when clown walking was going. So everybody they doing the thing, and I'm like, oh, that's tight. Let me learn how to do that. And so I start trying. He starts clowning me. So in the middle of this, man, I moved the chair back to go swing on him, because I'm like, that was me. My hesitation was I was a fighter. So if I couldn't voice my opinions and didn't know how to deal with my emotion and being, dealing with physical abuse growing up as a kid and dealing with all these different things, my first reaction was hands. And so in the middle, I go to swing on him, and when I go to swing on him, he invites me to church. So I'm like, I can't swing on nobody who's trying to invite me to go see Jesus, right? And so, man, I remember when he took me to his house. And there's a reason why this is key, because when he took me to his house, I was starving, I was hungry, and so I went in there, and when he was at his house, he had all this cereal, and he's like, "Yo, you hungry?" I was like, "Man, you got name brand cereal." Like, we had the Fruity Rings and the Choco Dudes, like that was what we grew up in. We didn't have the Kool-Aid, we had the Flavor Aid with the little straw, right? And so we had the powdered milk, we had the so he had Larry had all that food, and so I'm sitting there and I go to pour my cereal, and so then I go to the sink and I start putting water in the bowl with the cereal. And he like, bro, what are you doing?
Right.
I'm like, yo, I'm eating cereal. He's like, nah, bro, you can get milk. I was like, for real? Like, so you know, in the house, if you grew up you grew up in a house, you guys already know the rule with the cereal. Like, you can get another bowl as long as there's still milk in there. You got some milk in there, you can get another bowl. So I'm there. He's showing me kindness. He invites me to church. And so I'm seeing these people who are like, you know, this God that accepts you and he loves you. And the moment where I was trying to find that acceptance was that moment that church kind of came in. And we grew up in the church, but it was my parents' religion. It was my parents' faith. And so in the middle of all of that, hooping between us connecting, I started having this complex where I was like, you know what, I got to prove how black I am. And so the only people who I saw in that image that was showing me how black I was the cats from the streets. And so here I was balling on one thing. College is looking at me. I get the nickname Prime Time. I'm doing what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden I get lured to the streets because they started giving me acceptance and giving me an identity and giving me a name. And that was something that I wanted more than anything. I wanted acceptance. I wanted identity. I wanted a name. And that's why it's so vital to be able to share with your kids about their identity and show them who they are at a young age. Because if you don't know who your identity is, then the world's going to give you your identity. And if the world gives you your identity, it's going to be the furthest thing away from who God has called you to be. And so, long story short, fast forward, bruh. That identity caused me to hang out with some on the block, start hanging out on the corners. I start, thinking it's cool to be a stick-up kid. And then I graduate from high school, barely graduate from high school. And at that time, you guys know the story. I met Nadia back when I was 16. And so I'm working Chick-fil-A. I'm in the drive-thru. I meet Nadia. So Nadia's with me through this whole identity crisis. And we end up riding around thinking it would be dope to rob some people out here in L.A., and that night, man, we get arrested for 6 armed robberies and attempted murder.
That's crazy. I mean, I'm having like flashbacks of high school too, because obviously a lot of that stuff that you're describing, I was right there with you going through a lot of that. And another thing I think is important to mention too, during those years of when we were in high school, which is a crazy thing to go through as a youth who's trying to find their identity. Is that there was also a lot of racial tension going on.
Absolutely.
On campus, right? So a lot of what was going on the streets was flooding into high school, older homies, older brothers. They've been locked down. They've been behind the bars. So what goes on behind the bars affects what goes on in the streets.
Absolutely.
And you got these youngsters who are trying to model what they see in the neighborhoods, imitate it on campus. So I can only imagine, or not imagine, that I can recall what that was like, because for someone who's like, well, I'm too white to hang out with the blacks, and I'm too black to get with the whites. And someone like myself, who's very racial ambiguous looking, right, where they're like, oh, is he Hispanic, is he black? We can't figure it out. That was like, I remember facing certain experiences in those days. It was like, pick a side.
Exactly.
Because when we had to walk home, or when we would go to the point of swap, you're crossing through neighborhoods, right? So it's like, you better pick a group and pick it real quick.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of that, I think maybe with some of the, you could probably touch on this later, is probably some of the stuff that we experienced later as adults. But a lot of it because you didn't have time to figure that out on your own.
Right.
Because we've gotten to survival mode real quick. Cause it's like when you're taking that bus and you got to pass through the north side and that bus ticket through the south side.
Right, 100%.
Right. It's like, who are you with, and let it be known really quickly. So it wasn't like you had that time to really experiment where I felt most comfortable, or the group that I knew was best for me. Because when you look like them, so you must roll with them. You got associated. Really, you got
to find an association real quick. But we long for that relationship. I feel like that's how God made us. He made us for a relationship. That's why He said it's not good for man to be alone. And so even as a child, as a teenager, it's not good. And so, but the only way that I knew how to voice that and to fit in was I was a hothead. So they knew they could say anything, I'm taking off. So they would play that. They would play that to their advantage. But like, yo, hey Jay, somebody said something, and I'm like, okay, well get out there then. So I would go and just knock cats out and fight. But the worst part about it was I have a backpack on, and I never took my backpack off. It was like a Superman backpack that had a clear slit in it, right? So my Larry's like, L's telling us like, yo, you gotta walk this way, you gotta honor God. And so I'm like, all right. So I got a scripture on my backpack that says bad company corrupts good character, but I'm knocking cats out. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so I got kicked out of Diamond Ranch, went to Chino Hills High, and then I'm in Chino Hills High.
Shout out.
I'm being shout out to the Hills, man. And so then I'm there and I'm meeting this whole nother group of people. So now I'm taking the cats from Diamond Ranch, connect them to the cats to Chino Hills, like John Willie and all our boys. And then from there, I end up moving And so I couldn't go back to Chino Hills because they wouldn't let me in.
Right.
I tried to go back to Diamond Ranch. I was there for one day.
Right.
And the principal was like, oh, nah, you ain't coming back. So I got booted. I had to go to Chino. And so when I graduated from Chino High, I'm the last 2 months of my senior year. I'm bitter. I'm angry. Like, you know, I was hooping. But then that's when, you know, the story that we heard when I met Dips. And that's kind of how all of that, you know, diverged into one whole clique where we all met when we were 17 years old. You know, we met you when we were 17. Cam and I have been rocking for that year since we were 13. And so by that time, man, we're just in this place with young men trying to figure out who we are.
Right. So you touched on meeting wifey. You know, what, 16? 16 years old, right? So who's still wifey to this day?
To this day.
By the way. So shout out to sis, man. Talking about rocking with your boy, right? So run us through that a little bit. Because, I mean, obviously it's dating as a teenager, right? In the midst of all that, you catch your case, you know, you get incarcerated, you do a little time in prison, you're fighting your case, wifey's there. And I know that because I was at your case hearing that we were sitting next to each other, right? Talk about that a little bit and then get into going through the prison and then coming out. And that's really the part I'm interested in because to come out and have an ideal of what your life should look like or what you want it to look like, right? You have this young lady who's been with you by your side fighting your case. You know, then you guys had children early. So take us through, like, hey, you mentioned catching your case, wifey's rocking with you, fighting your case. Take us through the mindset and implementation as far as becoming a husband, becoming a young father.
Bruh, it was crazy because when that happened, and I remember life got real in that moment, man. Life got real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm now, I just turned 18. I was supposed to go to spring ball to go play college football. And here I am trying to be a stick-up kid, you know, Life Jennings. So he's like, you know.
I'll be robbing him.
Yeah. So we thought it was cool. And in the middle of all of this, man, I just watched how God just started. Again, 6 armed robberies, attempted murder, never been in trouble at all. Like, never went into the back of a police car at that time. And so while we're in this process, I go to LA County Jail. And now every prison movie, state property, all that going through my head, like, from HBO, like, nah, G. And so I started praying in that moment. I finally got on my knees and said, okay, God, like, I know you had something for me, but I'm done playing. Whatever it is you want from me, I'm going to do it. But you need to show me that you're real. Because I got real problems, real issues. So I'm in there, and I called Nadia. I remember I was working at Starbucks at that time. I said, baby, can you call my boss? I ain't going to be able to make my shift. And I didn't know anything about jail. I didn't know. They're like, why are you robbing people? And so part of it was the people who were in the car with me robbed some other folks while I was at the tattoo spot, and I didn't even know about it. And so they asked to get some chips and soda. They robbed some cats. So there were other ones that I didn't even know about. But because they used my car, I got charged as an accessory for that. And then there was, you know, there's so many different things to the case. And so while I'm in there, life gets real. And I remember, man, I dropped like 20 pounds the first 3 weeks that I was locked up. Because I was so stressed out. Here I'm in this different world. Cats were recognizing me from, you know, from, hey, man, what? Didn't you play? Didn't you? Hey. And so while I'm in there, man, it was the worst part because here I am. My life wasn't in my hands. There was nothing that I could do to change my life. There was nothing. So I had to cling to God in that moment. But I was like, God, because I'm in this different world. The race rights are cracking off. I got a scar on my neck where they came at my neck with a razor blade to cut my neck open. And God is just protecting me throughout this process. Nadia's, her parents moved to Vegas. Tell her, you know, leave them. You know, in that moment, Nadia's like, no. And she stays, goes to college, gets a job, drives 2 hours to go to Wayside out here in LA, pitches detention center, wait in line for 4 hours to see me for 30 minutes, did it every single weekend. And in that process, it was me. Then I was like, yo, well, then I'm just going to start building myself up. I'm going to start loving on people. I'm going to start doing this. Amazing how when you stand in a place where you kind of being disobedient and you really don't want to listen to God, he kind of has a way of forcing you to be who he called you to be. So you're either going to do it in freedom or you're going to do it whether you in change, right? So you're going to do it regardless. You're going to do it regardless. So God was like, yo, I'm not playing with you. And so in the middle of this process, man, it starts going crazy. And they come to me and my crime me is claiming that he's from a gang that he's not really from. And so they're going to kill him. And so I get the nickname Preacher Boy inside of LA County Jail, where the Bloods, the Crips, the Sureños, the Skinheads, all of them are asking me to pray for their cases. So I'm like, okay, well, if Jesus started doing miracles, I'm going to start praying for these cats. So I started praying for them, and they started getting out. Like, I'm talking like full-on like, I'm praying when they getting out, but I'm still locked up.
Right.
I'm like, dang God, this math don't add up.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know these guys gonna be back in here in like 3 weeks, but you set them free, and God was just building me up, and I started changing my mindset to see these COs as like my drill sergeants, because I was like, well, God, if you set these people free, then I know you can do it for me. And they're like, yo, we got the deal, 16 years to life, and I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah. I said, I'm gonna take it. And they're like, really? I said, yeah, you do half and I'm gonna do half. Like, you crazy.
Right.
And so in that process, man, it came to a point where they're like, yo, if you go to trial, you'll get off scot-free, but your crime will get 32 to life. And I was like, he ain't gonna survive. Like, at least I'll survive. So if they give him a decent deal, I'll take whatever they give me. And now the race riots happened. My neck was cut open with a razor blade. Like, all this is happening. Cats are dying. I remember calling my mom. So I was like, Mom, look, if they give my crimey a better deal, I'm going to take whatever they give me. My mom's crying. She's like, what if you die in there? Like, people are dying. And at this point, man, God had become so real to me. I said, well, then, Mom, I die a martyr, because people need to know about this life that they can live and still be free. And so if I die, then I die a martyr. And so that's when I took my deal, and they sent me to Chino State Prison. And so while I'm in Chino State Prison, Nadia's still with me. She's still giving me letters of encouragement. My parents came and visited me a couple times. You were over there picking up my phone calls. I was calling you on a regular, like, yo, this is where I'm at. And so you like, yo, Dip said, what's up? And you guys left the phone line open. You guys would give me cards and things like that. And so when I'm in there, they put me in solitary confinement, and I'm locked down 24 hours a day, eating with my hands. And so that was a moment where I really had to have mental strength to build that up, to know that, okay, God, if you said that you set people free, I still have to have faith, even though with what I see is contrary. And that type of faith kind of built me up. I'm in my 16 years of life. I'm in my sentence, 11 and a half months in on a level 4 yard. My celly's 21 years old with 7 life sentences. So all of this stuff is happening in my life, but I still got faith to believe that God can do something crazy. I'm listening to my sister's graduation music. Chino Hills High is right here. I'm watching the neighborhood where my parents are at, and I'm just like, man, I wonder if anybody can hear me screaming. Like, I'm cool on the outside, but I'm screaming on the inside. And it was like something we said where it's like, you can talk on that, but just because it looks like we carrying it well doesn't mean
it's not heavy.
It ain't heavy. And so I'm in this process where I'm on a level 4 yard, 11 and a half months in. They say, Osborne, roll it up. I said, where am I going? They're like, you're going back up to LAX courthouse. I go back up, and they say, upon reviewing your letter. I said, what letter? And they said, you got a letter on your behalf from the assistant warden of Chino State Prison. I never saw him, never met him, never shook his hand. He said, it's a good young man who hit a bump on the road. Let him go. And so when I should have served 16 years to life, I served 11 and a half months, and the psychologist turned my sentence into what they call a Z number, which is like a 90-day observation. And so I left with a felony. I had a strike, but I was free. And so I remember that moment. I came out, and I thought life would be amazing, man.
But you quickly found out it wasn't, right?
Man.
So this is the part now where I feel like it gets good. Because I feel like if anyone's going to take anything away from this episode, it's going to be in this part right here. This chunk. Because you're coming out optimistic. Life's going to be great. I got my lady. I'm a free man. Then you find out real quick how people in society with a felony get treated. Right? On top of that, again, you become this young father. And it's the struggle of trying to turn your daydreams into reality, right? I want to live in a certain neighborhood. I see this lifestyle for my wife and I, my family. I'm going to do this for money. And all that gets shut down. So tell us about the mindset you had coming out of what you thought it was going to look like. How you quickly found out that it wasn't realistic. And then what you had to implement and what was shifted. What was the paradigm shift to get back on track to actually making some progress in that situation?
So what's crazy is when I got out, I was like, okay, I'm free. So I didn't know what that meant if I had a strike and a felony. I was like, I'm free, so everybody's going to be cool with me. So I was like, yo, I was doing like God stuff inside, so I'm going to go to school to become a pastor. I got a Division II basketball scholarship to play for Life Pacific University.
I remember that.
So y'all remember that, bro? So we get out, but here I am. I got locked up at 18. I'm 19 now when I get out, like 19 and a half when I get out. I never went to the club thing, never got to hang out. So now I meet up with y'all fools.
Right.
And y'all ain't even living right at that time.
And just start getting money.
You know what I'm saying? Y'all started getting money, so I'm hooping, but I'm broke, because I'm on that FAFSA money.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm on this righteous tip. So y'all like, yo, man, we got to go to this club called Scribbles, and we started hanging out with y'all. So then when I started hanging out, like there's rules on this Christian college that you ain't supposed to
we
do.
Sneaking them out 2 o'clock in the
Y'all
morning.
sneaking me
out in the parking lot, sneaking them out the dorms.
Right, and we walking on everybody's like, who's at this college at that time, like really worrying about that life. So like, who are these black guys coming in and y'all swagged out and like, yo, so we hit these clubs and I sneak back in and we drinking and end up making some dumb decisions where they end up pretty much kicking me out of the school or like, yo, you gotta go. Well, they were like, yo, if you're gonna stay here, you're gonna be in your curfew. You gotta be here at 10. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I was like, man, I just got out of prison. Y'all ain't gonna make me back. And I remember in that moment, whoever that person was, and I don't remember the name, but they looked at me and instead of saying, hey, we understand you made a mistake, and I went in front of the whole school, apologized. They were like, yo, we don't believe God's callings on your life. We don't believe that you're called to ministry. This ain't for you. So in that moment, I said, well, then F the church, F God. I don't want to see another, a white person worship, sing. Like I was in that place. So I said, so then I was like, okay, well then I'm going to get a job. So then when I try to apply for jobs, like, wow, you're great. You learned. I tell them about my background. They would look at me like I was a monster. And then all of a sudden I said, okay, so then you want to see a monster? Then I'm going to show you a monster. So I went back into the streets. 6 months after I got out, I didn't even last the first semester in college. I get out, Nadia and I are going back. I tell Nadia like, yo, look, I don't love you anymore. All this stuff happens. After she stayed with me, and then we end up finding out that she's pregnant with Jaden, I tell her to get an abortion because I was like, I don't want my son going through the hell that I went through, that I'm going through right now. And in that moment, man, she was just had to go through this process by herself. And my dad said something to me. He said, son, if you man enough to dip your wick, you better be man enough to take care of this child. And Pops gave me that, man. And so in that moment, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm back in the streets. I get arrested 6 months later for having over $20,000 and running a counterfeit money operation ring.
I remember that.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So then I get arrested 6 months after God hooked your boy up. 6 months after. I remember God was like, yo, I ain't playing with you. I would rather have you call on my name every single day because you hate your life than for me to give you what you want and you never talk to me. So either you're going to do what I called you to do or you're going to pay the consequence. So I'm in there. I'm not with Nadia. Now I'm like, man, I might have a kid. I'm sitting there. I go to court, 7 felony counts. So I'm like, okay, well, at least I'll do Fed time. Like this is where my mind was at. Mind you, this whole time I got this calling's purpose. Fast forward, man, they drop it down to one fake $20 bill. Nadia's still there with me. So now all of a sudden I'm standing outside. She's with my mom. I go to meet Nadia and also she goes, oh, you got some on your face. She touches me. I feel like this weight falls off of me. First time in my life I hear God saying, like, what are you doing? This is the woman you're supposed to marry. My change was so quick. All the dope money that I had, like I sold it and then I tithed off of it because I knew you had to at least give God what was his, right? And so I tithed off it and my change was so quick. Walking away from the streets, walking away from the gangs, walking away from all of this, that it took some time. But I knew that I needed to become this man. And what was so hard though, was I had done so much damage between Nadia and this process. Now we have this son. Now I'm trying to be a husband at 21, but I'm trying to be a father at 21. And I'm digging through trash cans, believing that God had a purpose for my life. And I think that's the tension that I laid in. Was like, how do you know you call for greatness, but everything else around you is talking to you otherwise? Like I'm looking at my son and I'm using t-shirts for diapers and Nadia grew up with money. And at that time, my mother-in-law was like, yo, like you ain't even a man. You ain't taking care of your family. Like, and I'm like, well, I'm trying my best. And I think that's the tension as a young black man when you're in the EBT line and I was the only one showing up in a suit. Because I knew that I had something greater for my life and I felt like a failure though. And so, you know, man, I think that was the tension where I'd be there and they'd look at me like I was less than. And I was trying to be the best that I could be for my son and for my wife. And dang it, man. And it was the tension of knowing that God had something for me, but I couldn't see it. And so I took my car and drove it towards the pole to end my life because I thought that death would be a relief compared to the hell that I was going through. And it was in that moment, dang it, dude, I wasn't trying to go.
Hey, it's how you know it's real. Come on, bro. Give it to us.
It was in that moment where God was like, yo, hold on.
Like
I got something for you. Like, I know it's hard, but I got something for you. And you know, months later, man, is when we got the call from Bermuda, And they were like, yo, is this Jeffrey Osborne? I said, yeah.
Right.
And it was like, yo, this is Pastor Leroy Bean, and we've got this problem with gang members out here in Bermuda. Right? Yo, so they like, and they probably Bermuda's gonna hate me, bro, but they was like, yo, we've got this problem, and would you come out here and help us out? And so I was like, yeah, how far is the drive?
Yeah, like,
he looked at me like, what you mean? Like, the country, like, you gotta fly. And I was like, what? And so we ended up flying out there, man. That turned to years of me going out there, man. Now I'm training the president, the vice president, the premier, 600 government officials on how to disengage active gang members. And I'm diving into all the pain of my life. And so then we moved back and nobody wanted to hear me. So I'm recycling cans. And I'm like, God, okay, I'm going to be a motivational speaker. So I'm showing up at Panera. And I remember when I would show up at Panera Bread, man, I would wake up every morning at 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. I have these books open in front of me, man, and I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I wanted to preach and share my story. And I was sending like 2,000 press kits out back in that day where you would press the stickers. And shout out to L, man, Larry, man, and Hot, because him and Melissa and my wife, we in the living room like, oh, we gonna get this. And here we are in a house with no furniture. It's freezing. We have to open up the oven to be able to have heat, or we'd be freezing in front of that. We had nothing, but I had a dream of like that we gonna become something great. Nobody would hear me. Nobody would want to hear my time. No pastor wanted to sit down with me at that time. So I said, well, then I'm going to create my own. So I created the Gold Mine.
Gold Mine.
And so when I created the Gold Mine, it was like the moment after I tried to take my life, there's a man named Rick Gutman. That's my brother to this day. He was wealthy in network marketing. This incredible guy met me at the 24-hour fitness in Chino Hill, spent time with me, sat on the Robert Kiyosaki, Brian Tracy, and he poured into me. He was like, yo, I want to introduce you to this guy named Andre. Andre Walton was a multi-millionaire, bro. Right? Andre and Penny. And they became my brothers and sisters. Like, bro, and I remember the day after I tried to take my life, I jumped the curb, take my hands off of the wheel, and I hear all this skirting, and then it's quiet. And I open my eyes and I'm perfectly parallel parked on the side of the road and have no idea how I got there. The day after, Andre called me like, hey, bro, what's up, man? This is Andre. I want to let you know something, man, that God put you on my heart. I wanted to tell you that you and I are cut from the same cloth. So here was this man who told me like, yo, we cut from the same cloth. Here's this multimillionaire. So I said, man, what is in me that he doesn't see? So that's when God says the greatest gold mines are not in the desert, in the deserts of the Middle East, or not in the jungles of South America or Indonesia. The greatest gold mines are inside of that barista. They're inside of the person you walk by every single day, and they don't know it's there. And I remember that story that Justin Sapp told to this day, and I use it, where he went out to Africa, and they're driving, and there's all this bright lights on the side of this hill, and they're blinding there. And Justin, in his great way, he was like, yo, what is this? And his professor was like, oh, you don't want to know what that is. And he's like, no, tell me what it is. He's like, no, you don't want to know what that is. He said, please. And he's like, okay. He goes, those are the remnants of diamonds. The French, the German, the Russians, they come. And they want to dig the diamonds out of the hill.
That's right.
But if they do, they will leave the people in a worse state than before. And you look on your right and there's all of this poverty. And he says, but the people don't have the tools to dig out the diamonds. And so the diamonds sit and the people suffer. And I remember in that moment, it came to me that people have gold inside of them, but they don't have the tools that are needed to pull them out. And so I'm going to spend the rest of my day being a gold digger. And so when that happened, man, I started the gold mines. I started speaking in the house with 5 people at Mom and Pop's house. I went from 5 people to a house to 20, from 20 to 75. We'd have 150 people in the house. I'm playing packed in. I'm playing Kirk Franklin, Coldplay, Neo. Like, I'm playing all of this stuff. And I'm just crazy because I'm giving a word of encouragement. It's Bible. Then I'm praying for people. Miracles are happening. Athletes started coming, celebrities started coming, and that kind of like started this whole trajectory of where my life went, man.
It's amazing, and it's almost at a loss of words. I think I shared this with you on the way over here in this week and stuff too. But to bring it kind of full circle, I remember you were probably one of the first people that actually physically took me to church. And we were literally 15 years old at teen night, right, during worship, and I remember Jeff saying, like, I need to go to the altar and give my life, because if we don't change something, we're not gonna make it, right? And Jeff and I are talking about this on the way over here. Just from probably freshman year to today, in 15 years, we could probably name conservatively probably 30, 35 people who we ran with in the same circle who are either 6 feet under or doing life in prison. You know, so Jeff brought that up early in life. We got to do something different. This circle we run with, man, we're not going to make it. And we fast forward, what's it been, 20 years maybe since that night? Years. Bro, and you rocked that stage at that church.
Abundant living.
Talk about that full circle moment. And I know for the sake of time, man, like I want you to talk about what that felt like. Yeah. And then go into some of the like God morning, some of the stuff that we're working on now, bro.
So do that, but give it in this context. You gave a sermon at the gold mine in the living room that changed my life. And I still tell it to people about how David was on the back of the mountain, and the back of the mountain was Panera Bread for you. It was the gold mine for you. And then you had Goliath, and Goliath was David's opportunity. Talk about that transition, your opportunity, and then to rock in the stage.
Yeah, man, like the same over the world. The same stage that you were begging God on your knees to spare your life, and then here you are rocking a crowd of a couple thousand people, you know, 20 years later. Yeah. I mean, talk about that full circle moment, bro, and then along with kind of what this mentioned. Bring us to today.
Yeah, man. So that whole moment is something that I realized, you know, they say for us in the streets, they say if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Man, come on now.
And Uncle TD, man, one day I just want to meet TDJ. Like, I've been so close. I know his son-in-law, Pastor Torre, incredible. We've been close, and I've had opportunities, but I've always missed him. But TD Jakes helped raise me. In my faith, how I speak, how I pause. Like, I mimicked this man when I was in prison, his books when I was out. And so I would just begin to study and prepare myself, because I said, God, if you give me the opportunity, I need to be ready for this. And so with David being on the backside of the mountain, most people say like, oh, he was anointed to be king and he knew it, but he had to wait. No, the Bible says that Samuel came and anointed David, but if you read the text, it never tells him what he was anointed for. And there's the tension to know that you're anointed, but not yet appointed. It's one of the hardest moments of somebody when you know you're called for greatness, where you know that you're anointed to do great things, but yet God hasn't appointed you for that moment yet. It's not your time yet.
You're waiting.
Yeah, so can you stay faithful when nobody sees you? When David was on the backside of the mountain killing the lions and killing the bears and protecting the sheep, that was all moments for when Goliath came, and that moment came. So for me, I was training myself to speak. Nobody would hear me. I was recycling cans in a suit jacket and digging through trash cans, but I was ready for that moment to where when it came, this full circle moment came, and I'm preaching there. My daughter's on the front row. My wife is there on the front row. My son's playing high school game, but I'm sitting there and I got people from high school there watching me do this for this opportunity. And now fast forward where I'm at, it was this surreal moment where people can't, you know, there's a saying that says somebody with an opinion is always at the mercy of somebody with an experience. Somebody with an opinion is always at the mercy of somebody with an experience. I don't care who you are, where you come from. Nobody can convince me that God's not real and that Jesus doesn't save, because I was in that prison cell. The lifestyle I live, having multi-million-dollar companies, living where we live, doing what we're doing, having shares in tech companies and speaking for Fortune 5 companies. My resume don't even show that I should be there.
Right.
But because God was like, yo, if I set you up, nobody else can take that from you. If I spent my whole life trying to build my life on my own merit, on my own. But there are certain moments in your life where if God doesn't open that door's not getting open. And so it was only by the grace of God that I am the husband that I am today. It's only by the grace of God that I broke a lot of the generational mindsets that were hindering me from being who I am and moving how I'm moving. And so it's by the grace of God that I stand where I stand. And on that stage was this surreal moment that I was like, God, this is a far away from Panera, where I would take a coffee cup and fill it up with water.
Right.
And just have it look like this, so I could pretend what it was like for me to pay for a cup of coffee. And when people would leave, I would grab their plates and I would put it in front of me to imagine what it was like to be able to eat and afford food. And I never let go of that vision that God had me. And that was something that was big, man, that spoke to me, that where I was wasn't who I was, because who I was is greater than where I was. Where I was wasn't who I was, because who I was is greater than where I was. And so the mindset that I shifted was, if I allowed myself to play a victim my entire life because of the mistakes that I made, I wouldn't be where I am today. If I allowed myself to be able to stay and look at myself low, and my prayer was like 2 prayers. God, hide me before it's my time. Because many times we ask God for relationships, we ask God for blessings that we ain't ready for. And a blessing too soon is not a blessing, it's actually a curse.
Right. Yep.
Like, that's real spit.
That's
like,
real. That's real talk.
A relationship too soon is not a blessing. It could be a blessing in one season when you're ready, but it's a curse when you're not ready. And so I'm now 36 years old. And I'm speaking in front of all of these Fortune 5 professional athletes, coaching these amazing CEOs and individuals. And I even cracked the surface. But what they don't see is the 15 years of consistency and faithfulness and committed to my craft, the work that we do to get here where we're at. And so I say that hindsight because I'm so grateful for my wife, who I tell everybody, inside of every man, I tell every woman, inside of every man is a king and a fool. And whichever one you address is the one that comes out. And I was so grateful that Nadia addressed the king in me. And I had brothers around me who would elevate me and give me the hard truth when it was time to be able to do that, so I could stand where I'm at. And you know, moving fast forward, it's just making a decision to break through those barriers and saying, look, just because nobody in my family lived that way doesn't mean I have to stay that way. Just because nobody in my family decided to take this journey doesn't mean that I got to stay in this place. And so by surrounding myself with you guys, I would see you guys elevating and doing what you're doing. And I wanted to be able to get in those conversations like y'all, where y'all doing this and y'all doing that. And so it's just a blessing as we're driving here to understand, like, when you have a decision to make, I couldn't fathom staying where I was at because that pain was too much for me.
That's crazy. Tell us what's next, bro. You've done so much in 36 years, and you know, sometimes I tell people, like, man, we done lived like 3 lifetimes at this
Brother,
point.
you ain't lying,
You know what I mean?
man.
But you know, tell the folks, I mean, what's coming next for J.O., man? What's Jeff T. Osborne got in the works? What you can share, of course. Some NDA signed.
No, I can't share all that. But man, what I'm excited about, man, is we talk about it. You see us say God morning, God morning. So everybody knows when I started off, I started using God morning 10 years ago. And the reason why I started God morning, instead of saying good morning, I was like, God morning, God morning. And they know that because I had to start my morning with God when I was in prison, because it was the only way that I was going to make it through. And when I'm free now, I have to start my morning with God because he's the one who created my day.
Come on now.
So if God created my day, why would I not first consult him on my day? Like, if God knew, he knows everything. Hey, watch out, somebody going to pop off over here and they're going to say this, but I want you to navigate this and navigate that. Then I knew that God would begin to guide me. So when I say God morning, it's not just a greeting that I say, but it's letting everybody else know, myself, that I started off with a God morning, which means I'm going to have a God type of day. I don't want a regular day. I want a day filled with God's blessing, God's favor, God's protection over myself, over my kids, over Nadia. And so I'm grateful, man, that we got some big companies that we got started. But Nadia and I we're about to get ready to drop our entire God morning line. So y'all see the hoodies, you see the luxury. It'll be luxury leisure wear, hats. We're gonna have it all, and that's gonna be coming up real soon, that we're launching, because I want everybody to recognize that as you start with God as your focal point in your day, that he will give you that love, he'll give you that grace to get you to where you are. And ultimately, man, my desire is I want to love on people the way that Jesus loved on people. I want people to say, like, man, Jeff loved me well. And if he can share me that type of love, then I can do it. It's dope, man, because we got people at Starbucks when I pull up, God morning, God morning.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Yes, man, I'm excited about that and just loving on people and what we're doing, bro.
Man, I'm so excited to get the story out there, bro, because I think there's so many people who are going to be at different phases in life. I mean, you just went through like three lifetimes, right? That I think this really be some, information people can take and run with. Give us one gem, bro. Someone, whether they're coming out of prison, whether they're looking to start a business, whether it's the husband struggling to be a good father and husband to his wife, just give us one gem.
It's a verse that I live by and I share it all the time. The Bible says that your giftings will make room for you and bring you in front of great people. And the hardest thing for me was to unapologetically live in my you-ness.
Come on, bro.
And I became a people pleaser. I try to please everybody else's life. I try to do things like everybody else's life. But the reality is when I understood that God had for me what was for me and nobody else can do it, what's for you is for you. And if it passed you by, it wasn't for you. And so I had to realize that the life that I have, God put it together. My timeline and my comparison to somebody else is it going to determine where I go? And so my greatest thing, and I want y'all to hear this when I tell you this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself is to learn to see yourself how God sees you, to love yourself authentically, and to recognize that at the end of the day, God's got that right person, he's got the right opportunity and the right job for you. And when you focus on becoming your authentic self, you're going to get into the right relationships, the right opportunities, the right moments where your life begins to change, and then you'll begin to build your life that God has for you, and you'll be in front of great men and women. And I'm living proof of that.
That's it. And with that, yo, we out of here. We're bros to men. Please share this content with any and everyone who needs to be inspired to take action in their life. So, yo, appreciate you, bro. It's raw. It's vulnerable. It's real. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Love y'all.
We'll see y'all next episode.
Peace.
Peace.